Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. Well, hi everybody. Welcome to another recommendations video. And today I'm actually shocked that I've never made this video before. I really haven't. I had a viewer recommendation for books with great banter. And I was like, oh, I'm sure I've made one of those. Let me see which books I've mentioned before. And you know what? I checked my catalog and I have not made a books with banter, which is just so silly of me. I can't believe it. It was actually hard to narrow down a few of these. So I did pick some that are like some very like older ones to pull up, and then I also have some that are more new ones that I think people will be excited to get to. But I love great banter, you know, especially in like an audiobook. So quite a few of these I will tell you that I highly recommend the audiobooks for them, because when you hear the narrators and how they perform it and how it goes, like that is a lot of fun to do. But yeah, I have 10 different recs for you. Some of them I remember a little better than others, so just be aware of that. Someone I might be more vague. I will also have links to all of these books down below. If you use my link on Amazon, it does help out the channel, whether you buy an audiobook, ebook, or paperback. All of it helps me out here, so make sure you use those links below. And let's go ahead and get into these. So I, as I said, wanted to do a throwback for some of these. So one of the books that I adore the banter in these so much. And I do think the whole series has really great banter, because this author just really excels at quippy dialogue. That is just such a thrill. And that is actually going to be Carnal Urges by J.T. Geisinger. So I do have the new covers of these. I do love the Hunky Man covers, okay? I have many copies of these, but I do actually really love these new covers that Bramble did. And I think that hopefully it gets it in more people's hands. But anyway, so Carnal Urges is in the Queens and Monsters series, and this one is book 2, and this one is Declan and Sloane, and this was my favorite book in, what are we looking back now on? Is it 2021 when these came out? Man, I don't even remember. It's been a while, but this was my favorite book of one of the years. Yes, I think it was 2021, and I loved this so much. So this one, Sloane actually gets kidnapped in the beginning. Well, she gets kidnapped at the end of the last book because she is good friends with the fiance of the head of a different mafia. And Declan, he is the second in command of the, is it the Irish mafia he's in here? Or is it the, I don't even remember. It's been so long here. I know he's Irish, but I'm not sure. Either way, he's sent to kidnap her so they can use her as leverage against this other mafia boss that they're at war with. Now, the thing is, his boss ends up being like killed very early on in this, and so now he's the boss, and he has this woman kidnapped who's giving him a hell of a hard time, okay? Sloane is always on her feet, always on her game. She has so many quips going back and forth, and she just does not have, like, you know, she doesn't give him a break at all. You kidnap me, you're getting the full force of what Sloane has to offer. And while he has her kidnapped, you know, he is trying to keep her in relative comfort, but she is also running amok of him and his men, of just keeping them all like at the tips of her fingers, wrapped around her fingers so quickly. Poor Declan doesn't know what hit him. And before he knows it, he's falling for this woman. And now he knows he should let her go, but now he might want to keep her for himself. And how is he going to handle that? Well, we shall see. So I adore this one. It has one of my favorite romances of all time. It is super silly. It is over the top. But I just love that about this series. There's a good amount of comedy that exists within the Queen and Monsters, even though, you know, it's also dangerous and sexy too. So there's that. Okay, then we have Twisted Hate by Anna Huang. This is, of course, a part of the Twisted series, the series that really blew up Anna Huang's like writing career in the best way, just like blew it up. And this one is book 3 in the series, and this is a best friend's brother or a younger sister's best friend, and we have Josh Chen, and he's never met a woman that he couldn't charm except for Jules. And these two just hate each other. He thinks she's kind of bad news for his sister. She thinks he's kind of a stuck-up, jerky asshole. And before they know it, though, they're actually working for each other. So she is trying to become an attorney, and she is becoming, I think she's working with the hospital to help with like legal matters there. And Josh is I think he's a resident at that time. I think he's a resident there when we're there, but they're forced to now work with each other. And they have this great chemistry that soon turns into them hate fucking each other. So they have a enemies with benefits relationship going on. And the banter just does not quit in this series. It is so high up there. It just is so good. This series is actually a series I want to reread because I really enjoyed the whole series. But this was one that the first time I read it, I had kind of some problems with Josh, particularly in the third act conflict. And I really do wonder how I'd feel about it now, if I'll still feel the same, if I'll be more upset, or what I will think about it. But I still gave this book like a 4.5 star. It was a very strong read for me. I think she writes amazing banter in all of her books, but this was actually some of my favorite stuff. So Twisted Hate, definitely worth your time. Okay, another author who just, all of her books have great banter. It was hard to choose one, but I decided to pick one that was in my top reads of 2024 because this series is actually still coming out, so it's a great time to dive in and read the first two, and that is Wild Eyes by Elsie Silver. This is book 2 in her Rose Hill series, and this one is actually about a country music star who is taking a break from the industry after finding out some really shitty news about how her parents and her boyfriend have been making deals behind her back and everything. And so she gets the opportunity to work with Ford Grant, who has just started a record company in the small town of Rose Hill. And so she's going to be going there and working on a record with him and trying to kind of find her roots again. And she ends up staying in the guest house of Weston, who is the brother of Ford's girlfriend, fiance, whatever they are. And she actually runs into him in a kind of awkward way in the beginning. She's trying to take a picture of a bear, right? And as I've said many times, like, this book starts out with you really kind of being like, is this girl for real? Is this chick for real that she's going to be like this? Like, really? But we very quickly get to know her and just know, like, why she is the way she is, and, like, that, sure, she is the pretty little rich girl, but she's also never really been able to be herself and be who she wants to be. And Weston, who is actually a secret fan of Skylar, he kind of gives her the opportunity. He doesn't treat her like a princess or a pop diva. And again, even though he is actually a huge fan of hers, he sees this as someone who needs someone to treat them like real, right? So she helps him feed the horses, and she floats by the lake, or sits by the lake to come out with music, and she talks with his kids, and she really starts to fall in love with not only Rose Hill, but with Weston himself. But the thing is, she's only ever planning to be in town for a certain amount of time, the time to make this record. So what is the future going to look like for them? Who's to say? But there's going to be lots of quippy banter, including some input from a foul-mouthed parrot along the way. And I just adore this. As I said, audiobooks, great. That one definitely very good audiobook. All right, throwing in a historical here because I wanted to have a little bit of variety. And we actually have Married by Morning by Lisa Kleypas. And this one is book 4 in the series, I think. It's Catherine Marks, who is a paid companion to the Hathaway sisters, and Leo Hathaway, who is the heir and will be, is he going to be a Duke of Viscount? I can remember what he's going to be. But he has actually been a troubled man for the past few books. He has kind of a very painful history. A fiance of his died from a disease that, like, he survived. He's been addicted to, like, opiates and alcohol for the past few years. And it's actually his new brother-in-law that starts to help him shape up in an earlier book. And now he's at a point where he really kind of has to get his shit together. And he actually discovers that the home that they've been left, or one of the things they've been left, he needs to get married and have a child before the end of a certain amount of time, or else he loses it. And I think it was a certain amount of years, and they're coming up on like the last year. And he really doesn't care because he doesn't want the responsibility. He's like, most all of his sisters are now like married and have great husbands. And so he's like, I don't want it. Him and Catherine have had great banter the entire time through this series, but she is very like wary of him, and like he is a playboy, and like I'm staying out of his way, but he just can't leave her alone. He just wants to pick and pick and pick at this, you know, hoity-toity woman who has helped his sisters, and he just doesn't want to stay away from her. So yeah, he definitely does pick at her a lot, and then it becomes interesting because he actually falls in love with her pretty early on, and trying to convince her to marry him is definitely an uphill battle because, you know, he doesn't just want to marry her for the title, but he also, like, that would be a benefit if he did. So it's like, if we are in love, maybe we should get married and work on having that baby sooner rather than later. But yeah, some great banter between them, and I just enjoy that series so much. I think Lisa Kleypas writes great banter in a lot of her stories, but particularly Married by Morning, those two just go at each other. Like, it is shit what his title is, and she's just willing to go at him. Okay, then we have a real throwback here, and this is one of the ones that I don't remember it perfectly, but I do remember how much it made me laugh. And this is actually Right by Jana Aston. So she has this Right and Wrong like trilogy, plus there's a novella after it. So there's Wrong, which is the first one, and then there's Right. And this one is a crush's older brother. Okay, so our heroine Everly has been in love with her brother's friend for a really long time. And in early on in this story, we find out that she actually showed up at his apartment and like with a trench coat and like took it off and wanted him to sleep with her, and he like turned her down, and is actually like, it's a bit intense how much she's into him. And she's determined that she is going to win this guy over. Now, he actually has a brother that is quite a few years older, and he's been into Everly for a few years. And so there's actually this situation where I think it's from Thanksgiving, where she had set it up so that she would have the whole car ride with him home for the holidays. But when things go really badly, she ends up riding back with the older brother. And he uses this opportunity to get her to kind of spill the beans about how things have been, like, you know, why she's been going after his brother and everything. And he actually admits that, I'm the one you should be with. I don't know why you're into my younger brother. He's never going to be into you, but I'm into you. And she just can't believe it, that this, like, you know, he's the older brother of this guy she was interested in. He's a billionaire. He's very successful. And Everly is just kind of like, no, I'm not interested in you. And he's like, oh, ho, ho, but you will be. So it's a bit of a turnabout too, because again, she's been into his brother. He also knows that. So it's not a situation of like, you know, she hasn't hidden that she was into his brother. He knows it. And he's just like, my brother's not for you, but like, I like you and you should be with me. And so they go back and forth between those two, and it's really cute. I love these two. Okay, another throwback we of course got to say is Brutal Prince. Yes, I pulled out my old copy of this just because I can. But yeah, this is book 1 in the wow, why did I just forget the name of the series? Brutal Birthright. Jeez. Brutal Prince, this is a forced marriage between the Irish and the Italians, and these two families who, they haven't been full-on enemies, but the kids have not gotten along. And to the point that the Gallo siblings actually sneak into a birthday party at the Griffin's home, and Ada accidentally kind of sort of starts a fire. And when they get found out about it, there ends up being and then there's something else, because then Callum and his men actually kind of attack Sebastian and Ada, and Sebastian actually gets hurt very badly, and so the siblings are like full on gonna go to war against them. Now the Gallo's father is like, no, we're not doing this because you have these petty issues you keep causing. You will start a war. If you start this, I have to back you. And then we've started a war with probably our strongest enemy. They would be our strongest enemy. We cannot afford to do that. And so the fathers, because Callum's father is still alive too, they actually have a, powwow, and they forge a marriage alliance because like, we're going to take this potential enemy situation and turn it into an allyship and kind of force our children to work it out, right? So that means that Ada and Callum, they're forced to get married, and these two are cats and dogs. They are oil and water. They are absolutely like just going at it, and the banter between these two is so good because Ada just like refused to be cowed, and we do say like she has been a bit spoiled by being the youngest in this family and having her older brothers all like dote on her to different degrees, and now it's like it's not like she completely caused the situation. She just didn't help it. And so now it's like, you could have just went on, continued like, how things were going and things would have been okay, but you've pushed this. And now the only way to solve it is to make them family. And so, yeah. And it is like a way I always look at this too is like Ada's the one who now has to go like live at the place and be vulnerable to this family that like in the beginning she definitely doesn't want to be with. So it's a very interesting situation to find themselves in, but they're definitely not going to surrender easily, and there are lots of petty attacks that they do to each other, but eventually they actually realize that they could be a much better duo as a team than as adversaries, because all they're going to do is keep tearing each other down. Like, they are married to each other. They can't get out of it at this point. So let's make the best of it, right? I mean, if you haven't read Brutal Prince by now, I feel like I haven't been doing my job on this channel. So there's that. Okay, another one. This one was a recent read. And if you did see my last weekly wrap up, you'll know that I had a few issues with some trigger warnings not being listed. So I'm going to tell you the trigger warnings at the end of talking about this book, just because I think it fits this banter very well. But if the author's not going to warn you what they are, like I will, right? So I recently read The Apple Tree by Julianne. This is a kind of forbidden age gap. It is a nanny and a single dad. There's a 10-year age gap. She's his neighbor. She becomes kind of a babysitter nanny for his younger son. He's a teacher and a football coach at her old high school. She's graduated school already, but she's still very young. It's the summer before college for her. And her and who's this? Kyle is the hero and Eve is the heroine. They have amazing banter. And the thing that made this book so strong for me was their connection, because it wasn't just this like, oh, we're both hot, which can feel a bit, I mean, especially now that I'm almost 32, when a guy who's almost 30 thinks that like a teenager is sexy, just with no other context, it can give you the ick, right? It can give you a bit of the ick when you're a grown woman and you see that. Whereas when I was like 20 years old, I was still tapping into the fantasy of how much I wish that would happen to me, and you're more like into it. Well, now I need there to be more of a reason why a 28-year-old man is interested in a 18-year-old, right? And I think Julianne really sold me on that, because right away they're just quipping with each other and they're tossing barbs back and forth. And yes, she thinks he's super dreamy. Yes, he's noticed this woman who's watching his son is very good looking, but he's not going to risk everything on just a pretty girl, right? He's just not. He's a dad. He's serious about his job and what he does, like he's not going to risk that. So there has to be more that this heroine brings to the table than just her looks. And she does. She reminds him a lot of himself when he was young, of her like sarcasm and her quips. And so there was just a lot of fun between them. And so it was believable when the chemistry really ramped itself up, because you could just see their chemistry and like where it was coming from. It made it very like believable to me in that aspect. Now, the trigger warnings for this, there is self-harm and attempted suicide and accidental danger to a child that happens in this one. So just be aware of that. But again, I still liked this book. I just didn't like that I didn't know what the trigger warnings are when I read it. So now that you know, I hope you'll really enjoy it, because there was a lot of fun to it. Okay, then we have another nanny romance. Why not? Let's just do it. And they're also neighbors. But in this case, she is fully an adult here, right? We have If You Give a Single Dad a Nanny by Ann Einerson. And this was really the book that truly made me fall in love with Ann Einerson. I had read her holiday novella, but this was the first book in her series that she did. This is a small town romance. Absolutely love this piece of artwork. I show it whenever I can. And this is a single dad who is his family business is very good, and he has a little girl. And the next door neighbor, her name is Marlo. And she has a dog named Waffles, who is just a little troublemaker. He's so cute. Like, seriously, look at it. It's so cute. I love all the artwork on these. And she moves in the prologue of this, and they don't get off to the best start. He's very uptight. He's very protective of his daughter. He is just very buttoned up guy. And he sees this like whimsical, she's an artist. She's a bit like flighty is how he sees her. Her dog is always getting into his backyard, and his little girl is absolutely obsessed with the dog, but he's just like so annoyed by this woman. Well, he's had different nannies at different times, right? And near the beginning of this book, his one nanny, she has a family emergency and she has to move back home to help out. And so he's left in the lurch. Now, again, his little girl absolutely loves Marlo and her dog. And so in a pinch one day, Marlo agrees to watch her. And then basically both his family and his daughter convince him to let Marlo be the nanny, because it's like, she lives right there already. She'll be available whenever, and your daughter loves her and her dog, and it'll be great. So he's very, as I said, uptight in the beginning, and he gives her a lot of a hard time with like just how she does things and everything, but her genuine care for his daughter very quickly starts to win him over, and she does help him like live a little more, which is just great to see. So I absolutely adored this story. I think Ann Einerson writes great banter, great connection, and a very sweet yet spicy small town romance. Like, this had some great heat in it. Their connection was so believable, and it was also still, I wouldn't say it's like a slow burn, but their connection felt very genuine in how it unfolded. So when things went to the next level, you really believed it. It was great. Okay, then, wow, we actually have two black cat golden retrievers to end this off with. I find those have really great banter usually. Usually banter shows up well in a grumpy sunshine situation, you know, because there's more of that like oil and water thing going on. So one book I read last year was Just Between Us by Lena Hendricks. This was a part of the King family series, and this one has a tattoo artist hero who's a bit of a jokester, a bit of a troublemaker in the family, and then our heroine who has been brought in to work with the family business, and she actually works with one of the brothers in the family. And she actually has a little secret. She has a kind of a sex worker creator on something like who makes these like voice recordings, and he'll also do kind of these thirst traps like from his throat down of him like wearing suits and tight pants and saying certain things like very, very sexily. And she has actually followed him and actually had some banter with him, you know, anonymously through the site or whatever. And he calls her his like, her username I think has black cat like in it. And so they've had some great exchanges through there. And then when she gets introduced to her like bosses, like brothers, she actually has a really rough run-in with him early on where he ends up spilling something all over her. She recognizes his tattoos, because that's the thing. It's like he doesn't show his face on this thing, but his tattoos are very distinctive, and she recognizes that it's him, and then she freaks out because she's like, oh my God, this man that I'm way too attracted to, he's here. You know, this isn't a figment of my imagination on the internet anymore. And he actually pretty soon figures out who she is as well, and then he kind of like talks her into like, well, let's mess around a little bit together. It'll be great. Like, we'll do that. So great banter in this one. I love these two together. This was my previous favorite in the series, but then, well, I think this one was. I think Just Between Us was my favorite in the series, but the next one was really good too. They were very close to each other. So I recommend the whole King series. You can read it as a standalone if you want to, but the series is best if you read it in order, because there is kind of a overarching like mystery going on. So there's that. Okay, and then the last one I want to mention real quickly here before I lose the light is Not So Truly Yours by Julia Wolf. I, of course, wanted to include a Julia Wolf in this list, and I think this one does have probably my favorite banter in it. Again, this one is a black cat golden retriever hero, and our heroine is a baker, and she has a dream of a catering business. Not just a baker, she makes other things too. And our hero is a billionaire, and he is the kind of like trouble younger brother of the hero from the first book in here, and we've kind of seen him as a bit of a joke and, you know, the one who caused some problems. He actually used to kind of sort of bully his brother's now like girlfriend when they were in high school, and that's been something he's really worked through. So he's really worked through a lot of his things. He's a very lovable guy, right? And our heroine, she is a very like reserved, stuck in herself, but when she gets a business opportunity to like make her catering business happen, she is referred to this business that actually helps entrepreneurs get started. And Miles runs this business with one of his friends, Saoirse, and he gets kind of assigned to like help her with this, and so they begin a like business relationship. But the thing too about our heroine's family is that her family are actually undertakers. They own a funeral home, and you know, that makes people in this city like scared to like hire her to run food things because they are weird like that. Her family just is that creepy family who runs a funeral home, right? So Miles thinks that's absolutely ridiculous. And so he actually convinces Daisy to fake date him because he says, my name will like get you into places. So while he's helping her with his business, they're also fake dating, and then it's going to go somewhere eventually. But I love their banter back and forth. She puts him in his place so well, because it feels good to see him put in his place a little bit. Sometimes in Black Cat, Golden Retriever, you can feel like the heroine's just ragging on him for no reason. But we've seen how Miles is in previous books. I mean, if you've read them. And he was a bit of a shit when he was younger, and he's caused some issues. So it feels good in some regards to see him put in his place a little bit. But I think it's just the right amount of sweet and banter for these two. So definitely recommend. So there you go. Those are 10 books that I think have great banter in the romances. Let me know some of yours. There are definitely a ton that I've read. I tried to pick a variety across the board with these ones, but let us know some of your favorites. If you'd like to suggest a video or you have a trope idea you want, I do have a form down below that you can fill out with a video suggestion. That sometimes helps me when I'm trying to decide what to film, right? So thank you so much for watching, my friends, and we'll see you next time. Bye.